When it comes to these concepts of facticity and transcendence we've been talking about, when you just think generally about the facts that are true about you and the possibilities that you have, where are those things located? Where are you looking to find those? Those things aren't hidden somewhere deep down within you that only you have access to. You may have a particular perspective of the facts that are true about you and the possibilities that you have, but not only do you have an incentive to slip into bad faith and tell yourself a story about them, Sartre would say, you don't have some privileged VIP access to the facts that are true about you and the possibilities that you have. I mean, hypothetically, any other person, if they were diligent enough, has access to your facticity and transcendence. In fact, just like the guy that tells himself that he's Napoleon, sometimes other people are better at telling us who we are than we are. But how is this possible? The reason it's possible is because the self is not the Christian soul to Sartre. Just like your facticity and transcendence, what we're referencing when we talk about ourselves is outside of us. It's an abstraction. It's the conglomeration of all the things you've ever actually done in your life. When you want to get a solid answer to the question, who am I? You don't reference the story that you tell yourself in your head that's clouded by all sorts of bad faith and wishful thinking, like the guy that thinks he would try to take down the gunman at Walmart. No, we tell ourselves stories all the time. What follows from this is that the true measure of your values, the true measure of who you are, is what you actually do. It's the collection of what you've actually done thus far in your life. And Sartre says that when you stop looking at the self as though it's this thing inside of you, and you start looking at it more accurately as this abstraction that's outside of us, what you inevitably start to realize is that it's impossible to ever get a full picture of who you are without referencing the way that other people view you. More than that, it's impossible to ever get a full picture of being without referencing other people. And I mean, here's what he's getting at. So far, when it comes to describing being, we've been presented with being in itself and being for itself. But it's right here, fairly late in Being and Nothingness, that Sartre lays out his third ontological category, what he calls being for others. Let's talk about what he means. Sartre would say that an intrinsic part of what it is to be you is existing alongside other people and all the consequences that come along with that. This is Sartre's concept of being for others. Now, how does being for others affect my answer to the question, who am I? Well, again, this concept of the self is outside of us. It's an abstraction. And what Sartre points out is that there are many aspects about who we are that are given to us by other people. For example, whether we're trustworthy or not. Whether or not you're a trustworthy person is an aspect of who you are that's mediated by other people, right? Whether I'm a nice or mean person. Look, I may think of myself as a nice person, but if every single other person I encounter all throughout my life says that I'm mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm a mean person. This concept of the self and how other people view us seem to be connected to Sartre. But the flip side of it being that interconnected is that it leaves us in what he describes as a perpetual state of being judged by the people around us. We're almost always being turned into pure facticity in other people's minds. For example, have you ever walked around and you're self-conscious about the way you look? Maybe you just got a new pair of shoes and you think they look weird. And as you're walking around, you feel like every person that passes you is looking at you and they're thinking, wow, what were they thinking when they picked out those shoes? This is obviously a person that doesn't care very much about the way that they look. In other words, they're looking at you and they're turning you into an object in their subjective view of the world. Pure facticity. You will henceforth be known as the weird shoes guy in that person's mind. This is constantly going on. But Sartre's not saying it's always bad, that being around other people is some paranoid, everybody's thinking bad things about me all the time thing. People very well may be thinking really good things about you all the time. The point that Sartre wants to make is that this whole dynamic, this dynamic of other people seeing you, putting you on trial, and turning you into pure facticity in their minds, this is going on all the time, simply by virtue of the fact that we exist alongside other people. And that while the insights other people give us about who we are no doubt valuable, we have to be careful not to slip into bad faith on either side of this dynamic of being for others. What I mean is, just because somebody sees you wearing weird shoes one day doesn't mean that you are now weird shoes guy in perpetuity. In other words, don't slip into bad faith when it comes to what other people think about you. No matter how convenient it may be to prescribe yourself an essence and deny your transcendence, don't turn yourself into pure facticity and just accept what other people tell you you are. Maybe you are a weird shoes guy right now, but you don't have to be in the future. But the other side of that is, don't deny your facticity. Don't tell yourself your shoes are fine. Don't tell yourself that you don't care what anyone else says or that what other people think doesn't matter to you at all. Obviously it does. That's slipping into another kind of bad faith. So to sum this up, I guess, look, intuitively, it may seem to us like we have a sort of special access to knowing who we are and that we choose to share ourselves with only our closest friends who we trust dearly. But Sartre would say that the reason it seems that way is because what you actually have is a narrative about yourself that you've written, forged from a particularly biased perspective, and that the reason it seems like your friends reinforce this picture of who you are is because that's the very criteria we all use to choose who our friends are going to be, is whether or not they reinforce this picture that we have of ourselves. That's what we like about our friends to Sartre. For example, if a big part of the way that you view yourself and your identity is that you consider yourself to be a smart person, Sartre would predict that most of your friends are going to be people that are not so smart, that tell you you're smart all the time, or people that ask you a lot of questions that you then answer, making you feel smart, or other smart people that commend you on being smart like them. To Sartre, we choose our friends because they reinforce the way that we view ourselves. Of course we'd give them privileged access to our biased narrative of ourselves, and of course it's going to feel validating. Of course it would seem that you know better than anyone else who you are. But again, Sartre would say that the true measure of your values, the true answer to the question, who are you, is what you actually do.